It was a very difficult situation. The Guardian, to their credit, were trying to publish it. Most newspapers wouldn't have done for fear of alienating. But I think they were out of their way to do it in a way that was least likely to irritate him. And when it went into the paper, I mean, it was quite a scoop to have this police stuff on such a big story, but it was put on page 4, not on the front. And on the website, there was a big headline about, I think Julian had come out of, he'd temporarily been in custody, and he was giving some press conference saying that the CIA were trying to kill him. And that was the headline. And then underneath it said, oh, this is what the Swedish police say. But it was extraordinary, the reaction to that, because Assange's supporters went berserk attacking The Guardian for daring to reproduce any of this stuff. And it was just, I mean, it's an example of the kind of madness that goes on the internet, is that people are not interested in facts. They start with their prejudice, they express it aggressively, anonymously, and regardless of fact. So my position on this has always been, I have no idea whether Julian has committed a crime. I wouldn't dare to begin to say. And the people who are out there saying that those 2 women are liars, or CIA agents, or feminists, which they use as an insult, are completely out of order. They have no right to accuse those women of being liars, any more than anybody has the right to accuse Julian Assange of being guilty. They don't know what went on in those bedrooms. Back off. But what I think is clear in many different ways is that there is no evidence to support the idea that the Americans created that situation in Sweden, a honey trap, or that once it had happened, they exploited it to try and get hold of Julian Assange. I've never seen any evidence to support that. I've seen endless bullshit from crazy tweeters. And what I've also seen, sadly, is some people who want to support Julian putting out evidence which is definitely false to try to stand that theory up. So if the Americans are behind it, I've never ever seen any reason to believe that.
What do you make of Julian in the last 3 years? You know, watching him at the embassy in London, and his health degrade, and watching WikiLeaks. I don't know. Is it becoming less relevant?
Well, it's relevant. Well, it's a hell of a mess. It's a shame, because I've said before, I can't imagine anybody else could have done what Julian did in creating WikiLeaks. It was brilliant. Brilliant on the technical side about getting the website. I mean, he hired other people to do it, but to get the website so that you could send material to it anonymously. Brilliant to get people to start contributing secrets to it. Brilliant to raise its profile. But there was a point there where WikiLeaks became very, very marginal, because a lot of people walked out. A lot of his closest advisors and helpers in WikiLeaks walked out in that period, August to September 2010. Partly it was because they hadn't been consulted about the cooperation with The Guardian and the New York Times. Partly it was because of the 2 women in Sweden and the way in which Julian was handling that. Partly it was just because they felt that his attitude to them was rather dictatorial. But that reduced WikiLeaks to a very, very small staff. And when those people walked out, they took with them the kind of reservoir of unpublished secrets. So he was left with very few people and very little information. He doesn't give up easily, and he's kept WikiLeaks alive, even within the restrained circumstances of being in that embassy. But it's an awful screw-up. Just I mean, he's been in that embassy now for more than 3 years. It restricts his movement. It restricts his ability to do what he wants to do. And I wish he'd just come out and gone back to Sweden and faced it. And I you know, like, if you compare this to Ed Snowden surfaced in Hong Kong and was identified clearly as the source of those leaks, which The Guardian and others were publishing. Within days, the Americans had an international arrest warrant to the Hong Kong authorities. And there was a little glitch in the spelling of his name, and he used the time available to get out. Whatever it is now, it's more than 5 years, isn't it, since we published that stuff? Yeah. It was May 2010, so it's 5.5 years since the Americans discovered that Bradley Manning, as he was then called, had given this stuff to Julian. There's no warrant. Where is it? Why isn't there a warrant? Why didn't they release the arrest warrant when Julian was in the UK for several years, when he was actually under arrest and they knew his address? Why not try and get him? I just wish he'd gone back to Sweden, dealt with the 2 women with whatever outcome that had. If they'd found him guilty, he wasn't going to get anything very heavy, because as allegations of that kind go, they weren't of the most serious. It was basically about, they call it sexual molestation.
Okay.
And he says he's innocent, and he may be. Go back, get rid of the bloody thing. But to lock himself up for 3 years and more in an embassy, I don't know. It just seems to have been terribly badly handled. And there's a very tragic result. I mean, for him as a person, and for his organization, which has not been able to function as powerfully as it could have done.
And you gave credit to WikiLeaks. I mean, it's obviously it was never a news organization, but you saw the power of having that information and the way they did it, and you gave them credit for the way that they handled that whole piece.
Yeah, no, I think it was brilliant what he did.
But it started at WikiLeaks, and then it became about Julian, maybe, to an extent.
Yes, in the way that we've described.
Right.
But I think there was a point there, let's say July, August 2010, before the Swedish thing broke, when he was in an incredibly powerful position. He was right up there as a global figure, which meant that more and more people were going to be encouraged to send in secrets. He'd got this brilliant structure established. He's a very clever guy, and I was full of admiration. I mean, I still do. I still admire him, and I still like him, but I think it's such a damn shame that he has to behave in this. Sometimes he just does crazy, stupid things. He shouldn't have gone off to these other news organizations. That was stupid. And he didn't need to complicate the relationship with those media organizations that he was working with. And he could have made much better decisions about these Swedish women. So at the end of the day, I still like him, I still admire him, but I just think he should treat people better. And
will he be back? Will WikiLeaks be back?
I mean, I don't know. But I think it's worth noting, there'll be people who watch this who go, wow, bloody Nick Davies. But they need to think about those two Swedish women, and they need to look at the trolling which those two women have suffered, which is just about the worst I've ever seen inflicted on anybody. And just reflect on the fact they aren't CIA agents. Those two women were supporters of WikiLeaks, and they adored Julian. And all they have done is to complain about somebody's sexual conduct. And they may be right or they may be wrong, but that trolling is wrong. And for people who would like to pretend to be left-wing, to behave like that towards those women is disgusting. And they need to just back off. And at the end of the day, Julian was originally in Sweden because their record on human rights and civil liberties was particularly good, better than the UK's. He made a speech when he was there in that first week making that point, and that point is valid. And the only solution to that mess is to let some judicial systems sort it out. And this is just chaos. And in the meantime, back off and stop attacking people who don't deserve to be attacked just because you have a prejudice which you can't control.
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to LondonRealAcademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media login and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at LondonRealAcademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there, and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.